Great. Firstly, I would like to begin today by briefly paying tribute to Simon Brooke, who sadly passed away yesterday. In his various roles over the past several decades, he brought a focus to bear on the housing problems in Ireland. He provided an insightful voice to guide policy discussions and was always generous with his time to all parties and none, and to everyone who sought his assistance. I want to express my deep condolences and that of the Fianna Fáil party to his family, friends and former students who I know will miss his learned company. Our national conversation on our most pressing issue will be all the poorer for his passing. Aryesh Day Goreva Anamusul. Fianna Fáil Minister believes in home ownership. We believe it's good for individuals, good for families, good for communities and good for this country. For decades, that guiding thread linked housing policy across this state. By 1991, we had become world leaders in home ownership, with levels reaching 82% of households owning their own homes, and the average age of buying your first place stood at 26. With government help, a household on a modest income could achieve ownership at a reasonable cost, enjoy their home and ultimately, if desired, pass it on to the next generation. The path to realising a basic, decent and honest ambition is now being closed by this government's policies. We have plummeted to below the EU average on home ownership, 67% in Ireland, against an EU average of 69%. And whilst countries such as Germany and Austria are held up as examples to how Ireland should follow with regard to rental, those two countries are actually seeing increases in their home ownership rates, as ours is reducing further. A rent trap is closing on that aspiration and that hopes of a generation. Unaffordable house prices and unprecedented rent levels, 26% above the previous peak in 2008, where people in this city and county are paying 55% of their net take-home pay in rent, and is locking them away into a rip-off rental market. The dream of owning the roof over your head or having a place that is your own is now disappearing for a whole generation. The ultimate reason is a failure of Fine Gael policy. This is most evident in the flagship Rebuilding Ireland programme and Fine Gael's abandonment of home ownership as a primary goal for the state. There is a deliberate Fine Gael policy to push people into the private rental market, a market that's becoming further commercialised and institutionalised, again facilitated by this Fine Gael government. And in defending Rebuilding Ireland, Minister, you have become the Minister for gaslighting. For example, you have welcomed what you called boutique-style hotels, which are effectively bed-sits with a price premium, where rent per square foot is higher in the Liberties than it is in Los Angeles. You've attempted to depict missed targets and push back deadlines as progress. Even with something as basic as the number of homes to be built, we are subjected to blatant manipulation. Rebuilding Ireland set a target of doubling of output to deliver over 25,000 units per annum on average over the period 2017 to 2021. And that's in black and white in your own plan on page 18 of the Rebuilding Ireland document. In reality, it has delivered an average of 16,239 new units between 2017 and 2018, or 65% of the target to date. And in response, Minister, you have said that the target is reaching 25,000 by 2021. That is not what was stated when you announced your flagship plan. The result of the cynical exercise in spin is a deepening social housing emergency, shocking numbers of homelessness on our street, unprecedented levels of rent and a profound home ownership crisis. We have the highest rents ever, the highest homelessness levels in generations and the lowest home ownership rate in over 50 years. What this bill today forms a suite of measures that Fianna Fáil has worked on to build a ladder of opportunity for young people to achieve home ownership. We have fought to retain the Help to Buy scheme to support buyers. We've secured a new affordable housing scheme that will initially build 6,200 affordable units for purchase on state-owned land, and the difference is we will implement it and we will expand it if in government. Fianna Fáil is committed to the hard work of implementing policy and putting forward practical solutions, not grandstanding on motions that will not build an additional unit. We've produced over a dozen housing bills in just over a year, along with a costed and workable affordable purchase scheme and a plan to expedite house building and social housing by lifting the discretionary cap, which you resisted doing all year. Fine Gael like to criticise the opposition housing policies, but our housing policy can be seen on the Dáil order paper and in the hard-won gains in budget documents. Your policy can be seen as a cruel work of fiction that is rebuilding Ireland. This bill seeks to address the bulk buying of estates by REITs, cuckoo funds and indeed the state itself, rather than opening them up to first-time buyers. The state should be building, not snapping up homes from under the noses of first-time buyers and being part of that vice grips between the cuckoo funds and the state that the first-time buyer is being squeezed in. This bill will allow local authorities to earmark a certain percentage of zoned land, up to 30% at the discretion of the planning authority for first-time buyers. It will operate on a similar basis to the current Part 5 provisions, which ensure that 10% of units are set aside for social housing. Each local authority must also review their housing strategy to set out requirements for rental units over the lifetime of their housing plan. This will ensure a full picture of the housing market is considered when a council sets out its future plans. The specific goal of this bill is to prevent the bulk buying of entire developments by investment funds or indeed the state, thereby freezing out first-time buyers. It contains exemptions to allow build-to-rent developments that would otherwise not have been given the go-ahead as part of an overall housing strategy, while preventing developments already in place by being snapped up by investors at the last moment. This way, investment in new build-to-rent will be allowed, but they must be earmarked for rental only as part of an overall housing plan in appropriate areas. Planning authorities will have the power to look at the concentration and proportion of build-to-rent units in any of our communities and refuse planning if needs be, or alter that planning indeed. The crux of the issue we are debating this evening is competing visions on our housing system. On one side, Fine Gael has abandoned the goal of supporting home ownership and embraced a tenured natural approach with a view to moving towards more and more rental. On the other side, Sinn Féin and others criticise home ownership and just want social rented housing instead. However, in between those two ideological extremes are what people actually want, and they want to own their own home. Even the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, in its own surveys, have shown a massive preference for ownership. Fianna Fáil knows where we stand. We will fight for those ordinary working men and women who want something to show for their efforts, something that they can enjoy into retirement and pass on to their children should they wish. This bill marks another round in that fight, and I commend this bill to the House.